All right, a new warning we're getting from the CDC now, not about Ebola coming to America, about a virus that's already here. It's a respiratory illness called enterovirus D68, spreading across some 40 states, Washington, D.C., more than 400 people infected. Most of them are kids. To Dr. Florence Comite on where it's all coming from. Doctor, what's going on here?
Well, this virus is pretty common, and it's a respiratory virus that's easily passed from child to child.
And what is it? It is a respiratory.
It's a respiratory virus, and when you get it, it looks like you just have a very severe cold. But the issue is that a certain percentage of children, particularly those at risk for asthma and breathing difficulties, can get very sick and would need to be hospitalized.
Is there any treatment for it, doctor?
Really, there's no treatment except sustaining the child and making sure they can breathe. Some children have even had to have breathing tubes put in. But in reality, if you look at the big picture, the vast majority of children, over 90%, have done just fine. You just have to treat them with precautions, the usual precautions.
It seems like, doctor, this came out of nowhere. Or was it around and it just escalated to these 40 states with all these kids?
So the virus is an interesting virus. It's been around for a long time. Since the 1960s was when it was first documented. And that's probably why the older generation, particularly healthy adults, are not being hospitalized. And actually, there are not many cases that have been identified. They've probably been exposed to it before, done well, developed antibodies, and they're not going to react to it.
You know what's interesting to me, Doctor, you and I were touching on how fast this kind of stuff develops or becomes an issue. And I don't know whether that's because the CDC can't keep track of all of this stuff because there's a lot going on concurrently, or it's been distracted with Ebola. What is it?
I think it's all of the above.
Yeah.
I think, first of all, you have to make news, right? Here we are. So having an episode like that, and they want to bring people's attention to it because it is true.
So what do we look for then as parents? What would you look for?
You look for a cold that looks like more than a cold. Sneezes, sniffles, the usual thing, but you're being a little more careful than sending your child out to play or going to school. You worry about it, I think, because in the face of Ebola virus, which is a far bigger issue and kills 50 to 90% in some estimates, this virus does not really cause death. But what has recently happened is a certain percentage of children have noticed paralysis. So they're echoing the polio virus, and I think it makes news.
Does that paralysis stay?
We don't know yet. It looks like it may be temporary, but the jury's out. It hasn't really been definite yet. We don't know for sure.
Doctor, you mentioned Ebola, and I'd be curious to pick your brain here. Everyone says it can't come here. Africa's very different in here. But are you worried that it could?
Well, I think it can come here because it's human-to-human transmission once you get the virus from an infected animal. And then the virus can spread, and the incubation period is 2 to 3 weeks. So not to create any more panic, but there's global travel, and as a result, you can pick up the virus. Now, it does require a little bit more of a passage from blood, from secretions. It's not like the enterovirus.
The reason why I mentioned it, we're just getting word, doctor, and we'll alert this here, that they have an Ebola case, the first one documented in the United States, in Texas. Our John Roberts is going to be looking at that in the next segment. But when you hear one case, or you hear an isolate like that, what do you do? What do you tell your patients who start saying, oh my gosh?
First of all, not to travel to the infected areas, and if people who do come back from those kind of areas should take precautions themselves and stay away from crowds until they know they're healthy, particularly if they've been around people who've had the virus.
But you would not necessarily make a huge deal yet of an independent first Ebola case diagnosed in the United States unless you knew a little bit about what happened here. This person got it.
Exactly. I think it's important to be aware because that virus is very virulent and it affects the kidney and liver, and you bleed internally, and basically more often than not you actually die because there's nothing to treat you. There's a vaccine.
They worry that too, that it mutates into something airborne, but you have seen no evidence
I have
of
no
that,
evidence
right?
of that. It's really person to person.
All right, doctor, thank you. I threw a lot at you in this breaking news as well. We do hope to have more on this. Again, the CDC is confirming that the first Ebola case has been diagnosed in the United States. We're going to get a lot more from our John Roberts in Texas right after this.